Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. We are just letting people in from the waiting room. So just give us one quick second and we will get started. Thank you all for being here. Okay, thank you all for being here. I am John Blasco. I'm the Deputy Chief of Staff to Congressmember Dan Goldman, and I will be helping to moderate our discussion tonight. Thank you for logging in. I just want to go over some quick housekeeping and format guidelines for tonight. Congressman Goldman is here and ready to give some opening remarks, and then we're going to move right into the question and answer portion. We will be doing a rotation of live questions and pre-submitted questions from the registration. So if you do have a question for the congressman, please use the raise your hand feature. I want to reiterate some things. When I call your name, I will ask you to unmute so that you can ask one question. I want to be really clear that we only have time for one question per constituent. So please, when you are unmuted, ask your question. We unfortunately cannot have any follow-up questions, and I apologize in advance, but I will have to cut you off so that we keep to time and we get to as many questions as possible from constituents. I ask that you please do not try to go and give a background and a lot of comments before your question. Just jump to your question. Thank you in advance. If I pronounce your name incorrectly, I do apologize in advance, but we are going to get started. So Congressman Goldman, take it away.
Thanks very much, John, and thanks to everybody who is joining us tonight. This is, I guess, the second virtual town hall that we've held in the last couple months, and my goal is to do a town hall of some sort about every month. The next one we're planning on doing will be in person during our district work period in April. And so looking forward to seeing many of you in person. The one thing that I consistently hear from constituents, from folks all over the place, is a fear and real concern and uncertainty about what's coming next. And I think that although I was somebody who was trying to raise the alarm about this Project 2025 in the lead up to the election, I don't think anyone anticipated that it would be this dramatic, this quick, and this severe. What is really happening is that Donald Trump and Elon Musk are trying to effectively shut down the federal government. And they're not actually, at this point, taking away benefits directly, although they did try to do that, as we know. But they're just cutting agencies in half by tremendous numbers so that those agencies are not capable of meeting their requirements of distributing their benefits. Obviously, we know about the Department of Education. There's a lot of talk about the Social Security and all of the devastating impacts from those cuts. And the list goes on. Healthcare coverage, Medicaid is on the chopping block, food assistance, Section 8, and other housing programs. They're all in the crosshairs of Donald Trump and Elon Musk. And of course, the reason for this is not to reduce the deficit or make anything more efficient. It is simply to pave the way for them to reduce taxes for Elon Musk and other billionaires and large corporations. It is beyond cynical, and it is dangerous. It's anti-democratic. And one of the things I'm also happy to discuss, if you want, because I know it's a concern to many, is something that I talk about a lot, which is the methodical and very carefully planned elimination of the rule of law and our democracy as we know it. And it starts by eliminating all forms of accountability, which Donald Trump is trying to do. And then it goes towards getting rid of, federal judges and trying to intimidate the judiciary to agree to whatever he wants to do. It now, as we saw yesterday, an executive order where he's trying to take power he doesn't have to suppress votes and control elections. So I certainly am very aware of what's going on and doing everything I can to call it out, stand up to him, aggressively make sure that we're doing everything that's within our power in Congress to push back. Unfortunately, being in the minority, we don't have subpoena power. We don't have any control of the floor, so we can't put legislation on the floor. Those would be the best ways of doing it, but we're far from giving up, and I'm happy to talk about some of the different things that I am doing and that we are doing to push back against this. I don't want to take much more time because I want to get to everybody's questions. So, John, I'm going to kick it back over to you, and I look forward to a nice conversation tonight.
Thank you, Congressmember. First, I'm going to ask Wes Rayson to unmute.
Hello, I am Wes Risen. I'm a constituent activist, sort of, and I guess unofficially a systems analyst and mathematician. I put together a 5-page report on what you guys could do, either you or John Blasco, today that would be very effective on this administration. It requires very little of your time. It's a 10-page report. If you want, I could email you the link. It works within the system. It doesn't require waiting that much for results. It doesn't require any votes.
Wes, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I want you to jump to the question so we can keep going.
Oh yeah, sorry. The question. Could you or an aide read it? I'll just send it to
Of course.
your emails.
Absolutely. Would love to see it.
All right, thanks. Or I'll just put it in the chat. All right,
yeah,
thanks.
I'll send you my email address. Thank you so much, Wes. Congressmember, we had a pre-submitted question. Pre-submitted question is, what are the possibilities of Social Security benefits being interrupted? What efforts are being made to stop this and the unnecessary firing of Social Security workers?
Well, unfortunately, I am very concerned that it's a realistic possibility that Social Security benefits will be interrupted. And I think that's probably the right word to use. And I'm just going to take a second to explain how they're doing this. And this is true across different agencies. But Social Security is really, I think, the best example. As many of you know, they are shutting down numerous Social Security offices around the country, including some in and around New York City, one just north of the city. They are cutting staff tremendously. And they are now trying to require in-person visits for routine things that traditionally could be done over the phone or online even. And the combination of all of those is effectively to make it impossible to get help from the Social Security Administration, to make it impossible to get approval for your benefits, make it impossible to report fraud or report theft, make it impossible to verify disability, because to combine a requirement that you have to go into offices when they're shutting offices and eliminating staff is a cute way of effectively cutting benefits. And that is what they're trying to do. One of the things that I am doing, and I think it's something that many other Democrats are doing, is making sure that everyone understands that is what they are doing. And they are using sleight of hand. They used sleight of hand when they passed the budget a few weeks ago, which was a budget that requires significant cuts in Medicaid in order to meet the requirements. So nothing was about Medicaid in the bill. And if you read the bill, you would not think there was anything having to do with Medicaid. And so they thought they could get away with that. Well, one of the things I did quite aggressively was call them out for effectively cutting Medicaid, and especially the New York Republicans, some of whom have about a third of their constituents on Medicaid. And I no longer am speaking to one of my Republican colleagues who I actually used to work with a little bit, because that representative was so angry at how I aggressively went after them to expose what they're really doing. And that's one thing we are doing on the Social Security front. Vulnerable Republicans, New York Republicans, other moderate Republicans will lose their election if they cut Social Security or Medicaid. And they know it. And that's why they are doing everything possible to dance around it and to avoid it. What our job is to do, and my job, but your job as well, is to make sure that they know the consequences for them to cut these benefits. They have all promised not to, and they're trying to use, as I call, sleight of hand, where they'll call things waste, fraud, and abuse that have nothing to do with waste, fraud, and abuse. They'll just cut staffing, which is not cutting benefits. It's all designed to cut benefits. And one of the strategies that we are using, because there's such a slim majority in the House, is to really go after those vulnerable Republicans who will lose their reelection if they go along with the Trump plan. And I think that the message was sent loud and clear about this recent House budget. Now they're in the middle of trying to reconcile the House budget and the Senate budget, which they have to do. And it will be very interesting to see what the House Republicans agree to after they got so much blowback from the budget resolution that they passed.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I'm going to call on Marian Rydell. Ask you to unmute.
Yes, hi, thanks, John. And Congressman, thank you for doing this. We got together as an executive committee, and I was invited to ask this question, which is that, what the answer you just gave adds to the question, which is, what do? We have been protesting. We have been, I was at a die-in the other day. I mean, people are taken to the streets, and you say we should let them know, we should let the officials know that doing these things, cutting our benefits, are going to threaten their positions and their ability to get reelected. So based on those things, how do we, as citizens and as club members, what actions do we take to let them know that? And what actions will you take that will be visible to all of us to let them know that?
Well, it's a great question, and it's one on the top of everybody's mind. You are doing a lot of it, and it's incredibly frustrating to be here in Washington, in Congress, and not be able to use the power and the authority of Congress because we're in the minority, but to watch the Republicans just give away all of their own authority. I do not understand why someone wants to be in a job where their main goal and their main accomplishment is to just give away everything that they could do. But that's what the Republicans are doing. And certainly, you know, I'm consistently calling them out on that. But you hit the nail on the head, and I know you and Grand Street folks and others are very engaged in this. Part of this is going to where these Republicans are. And you've probably seen some of my colleagues who've done town halls in other Republican districts. I am planning on doing some of them as well. I am going to try to start organizing rallies around particular issues in areas that and in districts where these vulnerable Republicans are, and there happen to be a bunch in New York. I think we're going to have to throw everything we have into New York 21. I don't know how many saw that last night in Pennsylvania, there was a special election in a state Senate race in a district that a Democrat had not won for over a century. And I think Trump won it by 15 points. The Democrat won the special election, which really does go to show that New York 21, although a long shot, is in play. And the more that I'll certainly be going up there myself and organizing buses as we did with you in the last election, Marion, and others. And that's, I think, one really constructive and tangible thing that we can do. I know it seems a little technical in some ways to say, okay, the real way that we're going to stop them is by putting pressure on congressional Republicans to then put pressure on the president. And in many ways, it's not gratifying, and I feel that way too. But Donald Trump's not going to listen to me, and even though I scream at him all the time, but he will be more inclined to listen to the members of his Republican Party that he needs to move forward with his agenda. And so the more difficult we make it for them to agree to the Donald Trump agenda, the more likely it is that either they don't go forward with the most draconian policies and programs, or that they are forced to vote against it. And because there's such a slim majority, that is a viable way. I use the example from when I led the impeachment investigation. And some of you may remember, we got on the House Intelligence Committee, we got notification that there was a whistleblower complaint that should have been turned over, but wasn't. At that point, we knew that Donald Trump was not going to give us the whistleblower complaint if we went and asked him, and if we subpoenaed him even, it didn't matter. So rather than go straight at him, we started putting pressure on the Director of National Intelligence and on other administration officials and agencies, because we knew that they would not want to defend what was a lawless action. And ultimately, they put pressure on Donald Trump, and he released the whistleblower complaint. And then the impeachment investigation was off to the races. So this is a strategy that has worked in other ways in the past. And while it is not as gratifying for many in Congress, that's what we can do. The courts are also a critical pathway for us to fight back, and there have been more than 50 orders already that have stopped Donald Trump's lawless actions and Musk's lawless actions. And I guess what I would just say to you is I am up all night. I am spending 24 hours a day thinking about how we can use every lever at our disposal to fight for the American people, to fight against this absolute destruction of the government and the country that we know and love, and trying to be creative. And certainly if any of you have ideas, we welcome them. But the last thing I will say that's also very important is, please give us your firsthand accounts of how the administration's actions are affecting you or your family or loved ones or friends. I can tell you just from my vantage point, I really value getting those stories. I use them all the time because we have to connect with people who are not immediately impacted or not yet impacted. And we have to make them understand that it may be their neighbor today, but it's going to be them tomorrow. And so we can, I can talk about the data and I can talk about the 50% cuts in here and there, but it is much more powerful to be able to tell real stories of how this administration's actions are affecting people. And so we actually have a share your story link on our website, and I urge everybody to use it if you can. I really do use it myself.
Thank you, Congressmember. And for all those who are aware, I dropped the Share Your Story link to our website in the chat. Just another reminder, and for housekeeping, if you are trying to raise your hand, please hover over the React button on Zoom, and that's how you find the Raise Your Hand feature. Next, I'm going to call on Lee Crawford, asking you to unmute.
Hi, I want to thank you for voting against the mega CR and for joining 65 of your colleagues in publicly calling on Minority Leader Schumer to fight to keep the government open with a clean CR. That's exactly the kind of leadership we need right now. What I'm worried about, though, is whether House Democrats are ready to stay united the next time something like this happens, like with the debt ceiling. So I'd like to ask you, can you reassure your colleagues in the House, especially frontline Democrats in swing districts, that it's worth keeping up the fight and continue working to make sure that Senators Schumer and Gillibrand don't stab you all in the back again? Finally, if you can't be sure that Schumer and Gillibrand won't undermine you again next time, will you join us in calling for new leadership in the Senate, both a new minority leader and a new DSCC chair?
Well, to your first point, you hit the nail on the head in terms of one of the collateral consequences that is really unhelpful about how everything went down with what I call the non-CR. And that is that there were a lot of frontline House Democrats who took dangerous votes, risky votes, to stay united against what was a terrible, terrible bill. And now they got sort of the rug pulled out from under them. To be quite direct with you, they are going to be much, much more reluctant to do that the next time. And I think what they will need is public assurance from the Senate that they will stick with the House in order for us to be unified. I will say that my frustration goes back to December when we had a CR at the December 19th it was. And as you may remember earlier that week, the four leaders of the House and Senate announced a bipartisan agreement to keep the government open. Trump, who wasn't even in office, Elon Musk, submarined that whole effort with misleading information. And because they have so much control of the congressional Republicans, they basically pulled back that deal. Then Trump throws in the debt ceiling, which had nothing to do with any of the negotiations. And we push back, and he takes out the debt ceiling. And to me, that was, starting your own fire and putting it out. You don't get any credit for that, and we certainly don't get any credit for stopping you from doing that. And so when we ended up passing that, I was very frustrated, and I think I was the only one in the caucus who made my frustration known, that this was one of very few points of leverage that we have, and that we needed to take advantage of it. And since that time, I and others have had a lot of discussions with the caucus so that when we stood together 2 weeks ago, it was not something that we decided on the day before. This had been a long-running discussion that I was very involved in because I am a strong believer that we're in a totally different world right now with an administration that is just unprecedented, and we need to use whatever tactics are available to us, and we certainly need to use whatever leverage is available to us. Another byproduct of what happened in 2 weeks ago is that the Republicans are going to dare us to do this again. They're going to expect that we will cave, and they are going to put on the floor something that is bad. And we have to stand up to it. We have to say no, and we have to be willing to recognize that there will be short-term pain, but that it's worth it for the long-term gain. And I disagreed with the Senator Schumer's assessment because I thought that it incorrectly assumed or conceded that we would lose the messaging battle if there were a shutdown, and that the American people like you would just allow for Donald Trump to do whatever he wants. And we did see very early on when they tried to freeze all domestic funding from OMB that there was an uproar and there was outrage, and they rescinded that in one day. So we can successfully fight back by using our collective action. And I was prepared to do that. And I thought we should have done that. As to, the leadership in the Senate, Senator Schumer has been doing this for 50 years, and he is extremely experienced. I think by the time that we got to where we were, there was no good option. And so what I am hoping and expecting that we will do with all of the Democrats here, and including leadership in both houses, is that we will have a well-conceived strategy long before we get to the point when we're left with no good options. And that's really what was missing here, is that we didn't have a clear strategy to set the message early, to make our specific demands, to ingrain them in the American people's heads and their understanding, which, of course, will be favorable to the majority of them because the policies that we promote help people as opposed to helping the billionaires. And so I think that's really what we're going to have to do. But I can tell you I will do everything I can. And I was very aggressive. Let's put it this way. I was very aggressive with my Senate colleagues in the lead up to that vote. And I will continue to do that.
Thank you, Congressmember. Going to jump to a pre-submitted question. Question is around Department of Education. I'm deeply concerned about how the current administration is gutting the Department of Education and other dangerous cuts to the federal budget. I'm hoping to hear how the congressman will stand up to Trump-Musk destruction of our government.
I too am incredibly outraged and angered by this notion that somehow we don't need a Department of Education. It's abandoning 90% of the American school children who would go to public schools. And of course, as we all know, it especially hurts those school districts that receive Title I funding because they are underfunded, and rural schools, and all sorts of programs for those with disabilities and special programs. And then, of course, Pell Grants and student loans, which are run through the Department of Education. He's doing this through an executive order, and there's already litigation that is moving forward. And I think that's one component of it. The other component of it, though, and part of what our job is, and that I think about all the time, is that because of the fast and furious flow of outrageous actions and lawless actions, it's very hard for me to keep up with everything, and it's my job. And somebody who has his or her own job, has a family, can't pay close attention, it's very easy to get misled by what he claims he's trying to do. And so one of the things that I certainly am doing is doing everything I can to be aggressively out there, flooding the zone, whether it be in media or on the floor of the House or in committees, every opportunity. And as I said, we're going to start to build events and rallies around some of these specific issues, calling attention to them. But it's really a function of making sure people understand what is actually happening, because ultimately our democracy goes back to the foundation, which is the American people and the voters. And I will tell you, just from being here, that elected officials care about the calls to their office. They care about the emails. They care about protests in their districts. They care about other people coming in and doing town halls. Sadly, for many, getting reelected is their primary goal when you get here. I wish it weren't the case. I wish people's primary goal was actually to get results and pass legislation and make life better for our constituents and our country. But the collective action of the American people is ultimately the foundation of our democracy, and it's how we are all going to fight back together. And I'm proud to be here. I feel a great responsibility to be here and to be leading that charge. But it really is going to require unity from all of us, and all of us stepping forward, engaging more, and being willing to sacrifice time for the benefit of our country and our democracy. And so I'll do everything I can, and hope that you all will join, because I agree with you. We're in unprecedented times.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I'm going to call on Mari Cohen, asking you to unmute.
Yes, hi. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you answering my question. You made reference at the beginning of the meeting to the unlawful detention and abduction of green card and visa holders. Particularly, I'm concerned about Mahmoud Khalil being illegally abducted because of advocating for Palestinian human rights. And we've seen multiple student activists also stalked and abducted by DHS or ICE. However, over 100 of your colleagues signed a joint letter demanding answers from the Trump administration about Khalil's detention. But why didn't you sign this letter? And you also haven't made a statement condemning this detention of Khalil and other student activists. So I'm wondering what you'll do to protect this threat to our freedom of speech and right to due process, and if you plan to speak up for student activists for Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you for the question, and I'm glad you raised it. I have been holding off in making any statements, because I want to see whether or not there is evidence that the government has, that immigration authorities have, or Department of Justice, related to the grounds to argue and claim that Mr. Khalil or others who have also been detained now are a threat to our national security. It certainly is it was a concern immediately that it is just pretextual, and that it is that the arrest was based on content that the Donald Trump and the federal government did not like, which is absolutely unacceptable. But it is going through the courts, and due process is absolutely essential. And it appears as if Mr. Khalil is getting due process now, but if he were not, that would be something that was unacceptable, and that is the bedrock of our legal system, which I care very much about. And so I was waiting to see, as it went through the courts, whether there was going to be any evidence. And I want to be very clear about one other thing. Everyone has a protected right to speak and to oppose whatever government, policies or actions. But that does not mean that people should not condemn those comments. And the comments that Mr. Khalil is on record as saying, the actions he has taken by occupying buildings in violation of local laws and university policies, frankly, some of what he has said is anti-American and anti-democratic. And while he deserves, as a green card holder, the same rights bestowed by the Constitution, including his First Amendment rights, including due process rights, we should not be supporting such vile rhetoric, and that has fomented anti-Semitism on that campus, and that has made Jewish students feel very unsafe. And if we are true to our progressive values that condemn hate of all kinds, then we also need to be willing to condemn the speech and the actions of someone like Mr. Khalil. But he does have a right to say those things, and if he is arrested and deported simply because because he said those things, that's not acceptable in this country. And so what I want to see, and what the reason I haven't said anything specific about that case or any of the others, is whether there is evidence they have that is not available to us, that there's more to what is the basis for their claim that he's a threat to our national security. And so I'm watching very closely the courtroom process, and to date, I've not seen anything. And if that's continues to be the case, then it is clear that it's an unlawful detention. And I certainly will not be giving any countenance to the administration if they're going to continue to do this.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I want to call on Nancy Thorne, asking you to unmute.
Hi, thanks also, by the way, for everything you've been doing. I'm concerned that Trump is not, a lot of times will not abide by what the courts are saying. And I feel like he's a rogue, if he's a rogue president and he's not listening to the courts, we are not dealing with a democracy. Is it possible that at any point in time, if he goes too far, he could be removed by the military?
There's no provision in the Constitution that would allow something like that. And certainly, if we get to that point, we are no longer a democracy. But I agree with you that if ultimately Trump and the administration ignore or defy court orders, that is when we go over to the cliff into a true constitutional crisis. We've seen that congressional Republicans have completely abdicated their role as a separate and co-equal branch of government that is supposed to be putting a check and a balance on the executive branch. And that is just remarkable, shocking, and incredibly damaging to our democracy and to this institution. The courts, and this happened in the 2020 election, and to date, this has happened as well, are still the ultimate arbiter of what the law is, even though Donald Trump does not like that and seems to think that because he won an election that he gets to decide the law. Of course, our entire system of checks and balances and separation of powers is predicated on the fact that a president wins the election. That does not confer upon him any more power than he otherwise would have. And so I'm very worried about it. What is happening right now is, he continues to claim, and the administration are saying that they are complying with court orders. there are disputes about that that are being worked out in court. And there are a number of steps that would have to happen before we got to the point where we're in that constitutional crisis. To be quite honest, we've not ever faced that before. And, as I think about, and I think a lot about, all right, what can we do if we get to that point? And if the Republicans in Congress don't do anything, which all indication is that they will not, and Donald Trump just decides that he's above the law and he'll do whatever he wants, we just honestly, we have to take to the streets, all of us, everybody, and not in a violent way, but we need to be out there protesting, and we will need 100 million people out there saying this is not okay. And ultimately, we're going to have to be prepared to scream and yell and push back and use our vote and our political power that comes from the foundation of our democracy to put so much pressure on Trump and others that they do acquiesce and follow these court orders. And the courts have to hold. They have to continue to stand up to the threats, the impeachment threats of judges. It's absurd. We can take solace that none of these judges are actually going to be impeached. Even if they were impeached in the House, they would be acquitted in the Senate because you need 2/3, and that's not going to happen. But even just the threat and the effort to intimidate anyone who disagrees with him is what makes him so dangerous. And if there's one message to convey to you, for you to convey to everybody else that you talk to, it's that this is not a hypothetical right now. Donald Trump is trying to take over the federal government. He is trying to undermine and effectively eliminate our democracy. He's doing it for, of course, his own personal gain and through corruption, to make money, to help his buddies, to get revenge and retribution against people who challenge him. But that's what's happening. And we cannot dance around it. That is what is happening. And we all need to recognize it and stand up to it.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I'm going to call on Richard Corman. I will ask you to unmute.
Great, thank you, Congressman. My name is Nina, and I'm with the Downtown Independent Democrats, and there are 30 people here listening to you tonight. My question is about collective action and how you're working with the other representatives, both at the Congress and senatorial level of our own state of New York. And I want to focus on one specific issue, which is around the decimation of the public health system. Today, $12 billion in state grants for infectious disease prevention and control were canceled. Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which has vaccinated billions of children around the world, was canceled. How are you working together with our other representatives, Lawler, everyone, as a collective New York action? Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the question. I appreciate all of you from DID, my local club, tuning in. I have tried in every which way to work with the Republicans in the House, the New York Republicans in particular, and they pay excellent lip service, and when push comes to shove, they can't stand up for what they promise. So I don't have a lot of hope that trying to work directly with them will go anywhere. And that's why our collective action has to be focused on pressuring them rather than collaborating. Because I've tried the collaboration, I promise. And still on some things we're able to work together, but on these issues, they're unwilling to stand up to Donald Trump right now. And part of the reason is that I think they are more afraid of a Donald Trump, Elon Musk supported primary than they are of the voters in a general election. And we have to flip that script. In terms of state elected officials, I am in regular contact with state and the city local officials, trying to make sure that we understand exactly what the impact is, because as you know, very most of federal funding goes through the states and localities. And the attacks on science, the attacks on medical research, the list just goes on as to the indiscriminate, arbitrary, capricious destruction of what really makes this country special and unique. And it is harming people already and is going to harm a lot more people. So we are talking about it. As you know, the governor went down to the White House last week to talk about some of these issues. And all of these actions are thankfully going to the courts because there are tons of people willing to spend their time in litigating this to fight back against it. But the collective action, as you point out, is not just among all of the people, but is certainly at the different levels of government. And with the New York budget coming up, we're having conversations about how to prepare and compensate for potential loss of federal funding and how to make sure that the services continue, even if at least temporarily some of the funding is stopped. And so we're in close contact, but it's a good point that you make, and I appreciate the comment.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I'm going to call on Hugo Dwyer, going to ask you to unmute.
Hi, Congressman. Thank you. I'm a member of VID. I think we need to change our tactic a little bit and get much more on offense. I think we're spending too much time fighting other Democrats when that's not who we should be fighting. We need to keep up the pressure on Trump on every level, but the only way we're really going to get through is to beat him with messaging, which is where we've been losing like crazy. And I'm asking Democrats to come up with a tax plan with tax cuts for people making less than, say, $1 million a year, and nothing for people making more than that. Get very aggressive in selling it. Make sure it keeps Medicaid, Social Security, and Medicare.
Hugo, I'm sorry. Could you jump to your question, please?
Yes. Can we do that? Is that possible? Is there time to do that before the budget, this reconciliation bill? Can we get this kind of stuff done and get the message out there through whatever social media is left, through going on Fox, through going on Meta and X and so on? Can we do that?
Thank you.
Thanks, Hugo. And I think you're absolutely right. I understand why people are frustrated, and certainly why a lot of that is directed at us. We're incredibly frustrated and angry about what's going on and about what our options are. You raise a very good point that I have been having a lot of discussions about, which is, yes, we need to expose why Donald Trump's actions and policies are so damaging, but we also need to provide an alternative so that we have a form of comparison, so that we can say, this is what he's trying to do. This is what we would do. And this is why his is so bad and why ours would be so much better. Now, there's a pretty good argument to be made that the messaging battle is, in many respects, being at least initially set right now. And that is how to define what Donald Trump is doing. We need to make sure And I think we're getting better, although I agree with you that we did not start out very well. But we need to define what he's doing on our terms, not allow him to define it. Elon Musk and all the Republicans talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. Yes, I certainly would like to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. I think we should use modern technology to do it. What Elon Musk is doing has nothing to do with getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. It is actually impossible to know whether or not anything that he's cutting is wasteful, fraudulent, or subject to abuse, because he's just looking at a keyword and cutting things and then trying to figure out whether or not we need them. Obviously, if you're going to figure out if you're going to determine something's waste or fraud, you have to look into it. Even his wall of receipts is littered with errors, mistaking 8 million for 8 billion, claiming that he canceled contracts that were from the George W. Bush era, and the list goes on. And so we need to make sure that we don't allow them to convince the American public that all he's doing is getting rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. And so while I agree with you that having an affirmative plan is helpful, the most urgent thing for us to do right now is make sure that we win this initial battle of defining the message as to what they are doing. Trump's approval ratings are going down. Musk's approval ratings are going way down. We're making headway, but that is the most urgent thing right now, and that's why we are focused on that so much. But I do agree. We are going to have to soon turn to our affirmative plans so that we can provide the contrast that hopefully will be made once we set that message.
Thank you, Congressmember. Next, I'm going to call on Lisa Bolstead. I'm going to ask you to unmute, Lisa.
Hi, thank you. This has been great. I thank you. I look forward to the next one. Sorry, I accidentally scrolled away. I am very concerned about presidential interference in the operations of private businesses, especially with the operations of private colleges and universities. The foundation of student experiences at our most reputable schools is rooted in free thought and free speech. Do you agree that other than enforcing federal laws, the federal government should allow colleges and universities to freely govern themselves in policy, priorities, and philosophy?
Yeah, it's a critical issue right now, and I appreciate the question. It's a little bit more complicated because federal laws include Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which prohibits discrimination on campus that would make any student feel threatened or harassed on campus. And so whereas something might be protected by the First Amendment if it were off campus, it might be a violation of federal law if it's on campus. And so it is a little bit more complicated than just talking about the First Amendment, because you have an extra layer of the Civil Rights Act on campuses. I think that, frankly, a lot of universities have failed to enforce that law, and they have failed to demonstrate leadership in making sure that discrimination is not occurring on campus. I do not agree that the federal government should be using the levers of federal funding, especially for things that are totally unrelated to whatever the issue is, to coerce universities to change their policies. And I think that to the extent that enforcement of Title VI is what they're doing, and through the mechanisms that are available through Title VI, I fully support the federal government enforcing those laws. But to take, research funding away and to take grants away that, include anything with the word gender or diversity or all this nonsense is really counterproductive and an abuse of the federal government's power. And I do object to that.
Thank you, Congressmember. We have time for one more question. I'm going to call on Marvin Siperin, asking you to unmute. Marvin.
Thank you, John, and thank you very much, Congressman, for everything you're doing and for who you are. I'm still shocked that Trump wouldn't talk to you. How can we use all of the things that Trump is doing, appointing people who are loyalists and incompetent, who jeopardize national security, to reinforce people's understanding of the importance of democracy? Because one of the things that we saw in the recent election was that people didn't care enough about democracy to make a decision based on that. So how do we use what he's doing, which shows the importance of democracy, to educate people?
It's a great question, Marvin, thank you. And, I think I've thought a lot about this because in the lead up to the election, I spent a lot of time talking about the threats to democracy and the threats to rule of law, Project 2025. And ultimately, I think where I've come down is that a lot of people didn't like Project 2025. A lot of people agreed with the concerns about democracy, about the rule of law. But ultimately, they didn't have the luxury to vote based on that. They were voting based on how they're going to pay their rent, how they're going to pay their groceries, how they're going to pay for healthcare. And so what I think we did not do a good enough job of, it was to connect the dangers of Trump's attack on democracy and the rule of law to people's everyday lives. And I'll give you an example, because I've been thinking a lot about this as it relates to the signal issue and Pete Hegseth distributing classified information on an unsecure messaging app that almost certainly was being surveilled by our adversaries. Because, look, I think you could imagine someone who's not paying close attention and says, that's bad, but, nothing happened to any Americans, and sounds like the operation was pretty successful. And I don't really know where Yemen is or what the Houthis are. And I got to make sure that I'm, putting food on the table. The way I've been talking about it is part A, that we're just lucky that American servicemen and women were not killed because the Houthis didn't get the military plans in time. But also, it's going to have a dramatic impact on our ability to collect intelligence from our allies or from other sources. And what's important for people to understand is that if we don't collect intelligence, reliable intelligence, we are jeopardizing our national security. And what that means is that the chances of a significant terrorist attack on US soil go up dramatically. And in fact, I think if it continues on this pace, that at some point over the next 4 years, there will be a serious terrorist attack on US soil. And so I think that is a way of trying to bring it home a little bit more, because a lot of this stuff feels hypothetical or esoteric or intellectual or whatever you have, even though it is going to have a direct impact. Now, of course, people will start to feel the direct impact when they're cutting federal funding, federal programs. That will have a direct impact. But as you talk about, the rule of law and democracy and, pardoning the January 6th defendants to whitewash that whole story and basically create domestic violent extremist militia that's ready to jump at Donald Trump's order, or put Pete Hegseth and Kash Patel and Tulsi Gabbard in essential positions so that he knows that they'll do whatever he wants to do, and to fire all of the inspectors general, and now to try to take control over our elections. I mean, these are all steps towards authoritarianism. And, the other thing I'm talking about, he's canceling all these contracts. He's canceling union collective bargaining agreements. He's just violating them. Well, what happens to our economy if Donald Trump and the federal government just disregards contracts, disregards the rule of law? Well, then every contract you're entering into, every contract that any business enters into, all of a sudden becomes questionable. And if we can't rely on the rule of law, the very foundation of not only our government, our democracy, but our economy will be absolutely eviscerated. And so part of, I think, what our job is to do a better job of connecting some of these things that don't necessarily relate directly to people's everyday lives to something they can understand as it affects them.
Thank you, Congressmember. And I will pass it over to you again for some closing remarks, but I do want to thank everyone for joining this town hall. Just like our February town hall will be posted on our YouTube page, the Congressmember's YouTube page. Also, please look out for details for April town hall as well. Please make sure you are signed up to our newsletter. If you have any questions about that, you can call our Manhattan or Brooklyn office. So Congressmember, passing it to you for any closing remarks.
Thanks. Thanks, John. Thanks for moderating. Thank you all for joining us, for asking excellent questions, for being engaged. I sincerely believe, and I said this long before Donald Trump took office, that the way that we make sure we continue to have a democracy is for everyone to be a little bit more engaged, a little bit more involved than they were yesterday. And I certainly am consumed with this, and I'm grateful that so many of you joined. I want you to know that we are in this together, and we have to be in this together. And I am certainly down here in Washington fighting as hard as I possibly can, and in every way that I can. I am upset that there are colleagues, both of mine and on the other side of the aisle, who are literally scared of Donald Trump and scared of his supporters. And I certainly will never give in to that. And when I see that, it only makes me, it only steals my resolve. But we certainly do need to recognize the circumstances we're in and unify together to fight back, because at the core, that's how we will preserve our democracy. And so I'm grateful for all of you joining. Look forward to seeing any of you who can come to our next one. And make sure that you do share stories and are in regular contact with our office, because I use this stuff, it matters. And one of the best avenues that I have is to use the platform to try to set that message and to try to connect with the American people so that the voters stand up against what is going on, which ultimately is the way that we're going to win here. So thank you all for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you either around in the district or at another event or town hall.
Thank you all.